Jughead 2016-15. Archie's surprised that Jughead outpaced someone with pink hair that he already knows really well and I don't. Jughead's slurping on a soda and says he's ready for round 2 to pop Tate, who he calls a burgersmith. So by outpaced, Archie literally meant eating and drinking. How in the world is Archie surprised that Jughead would outpace anybody by doing that? Isn't this still a universe where Archie grew up with Jughead? Jughead risks choking on fries by pouring them from the McDonald's bag into his mouth, as Archie hopes Pink Girl could get one of the tickets to the show. She's got a good design. The pink hair contrasts well with her complexion, but I'm still waiting to learn her name and why she thinks she'd ever have a chance of beating Jughead in an eating contest. How stupid do you have to be to think that's possible if you go to the same high school as him? She better have been from a different town. Most people look at these designs of Betty and Veronica and think they're completely different people. Veronica's supposed to have blue highlights. Betty just flat out has a bad design, trying to make her look plain looking. Veronica calls this restaurant Greasy Fork instead of Greasy Spoon just so that Betty can correct her. Well, I suppose I'll give Veronica a pass because both utensils look like they're equally likely to work in that phrase, and she's not familiar enough with normal restaurants to know the phrase well. But it's still out of character of her to demonize Pop-Tates, a place she's been smiling about eating at with no complaint at all since the 50s stories. They exaggerated her rich jerkness in the 70s stories, making her an irritating parody of herself with almost no likability. If this is the Archie reboot, they could have rebooted her personality too to downplay her flanderization. Archie says he scored the last 2 tickets in town to the show, and Veronica says angrily that her connections got them the VIP seats. But if you hadn't seen the word connections yet, you would have thought it was Betty saying this. Because literally anybody would know that if you draw the text bubble tail this way, it looks like it's coming from Betty. And it doesn't help that she's the only one whose expression you can see. It would have been more interesting if Betty was the one who had connections in this case. Betty asks who the tickets are for, and Archie's so intimidated of their usual tempers that he lies that the tickets are for Betty and Tony. Didn't Veronica use her connections to get him those tickets in the first place? And yet Veronica's out of character by just saying it's cute when he tries, instead of getting absolutely livid with him for turning her down for a date. Is she still a rich snob or not? And how is Betty in a good enough mood to make a joke about this when he turned her down too? Tony disrespects one of the main characters by putting a napkin over his face to shut him up. At least it's Archie, so it's understandable. And she promptly makes up for it by being polite to Betty, saying that if she doesn't want it, she can find a date. And she's even polite enough to call her by her last name. That's not believable of a teenager to do though. Betty says she'll take the ticket, and Archie offers to pick up Veronica so they could all meet up for the tickets. Veronica says that her butler will pick him up at 6 exactly, because she must be trying to punish him for not taking her as his date. For a so-called Jughead story, you'd never be able to tell it's that and not an Archie story so far. Jughead stories have been very capable of focusing on Jughead and having him do most of the stuff, not just stuffing his face. The best Jughead stories have him doing successful money-making schemes, which require creativity to think up, or tricking Reggie. So of course this won't have either of that, and instead he bores me being a side character. Archie explains why he didn't offer the tickets to his best friend, and it's because considering how many of Pop's loyalty cards he can fill out in a day, he assumed he could claim enough tickets for half of Riverdale. Notice that he talks as if he's gonna have more than one loyalty card. Pop reminds him that he's only supposed to punch his card once per visit. Jughead reminds him that Dilton did the math and he gets his fill and leave faster if he doesn't have to walk in and out between orders, which he'd have done anyways. So Pop was smart by not going by the rules. What does Jughead say? Was that supposed to be a joke? There's blatant padding when we clearly don't need to see this page because it was already referenced what Jughead was doing here. Jughead starts walking away, and Pop hopes he'll get paid. And Jughead looks slimy, saying that he's just getting his wallets from his house and will pay him tomorrow, which I don't believe him about. At least that's in character. He goes by the Pussycats poster, which says to get a free ticket from Pop Tate's. And then Jughead looks in the window and sees Pop Tate dumping the loyalty card in the trash with the food it's on, when it's very obvious that no restaurant owner would ever be stupid enough to do that, and miss out on a lot of money. He would have seen the card with a single glance. Even if this was believable, Jughead had absolutely no reason to forget to bring his card with him. It's a food-focused thing. So there's yet another story that only happens because of a condescending idiot ball. I'm so tired of these. This was the only excuse these writers could come up with for why he'd need Sabrina. Even though Archie just said he could get tons of loyalty cards filled out. Not to mention, Jughead forgetting his wallets when he goes to Pop Tate's is also completely ridiculous because it never happened. He knows he wouldn't get away with getting into that habit. Jughead explains away why he can't just go ask Pop Tate to look for the loyalty card in the trash. He skipped out on the bill and there's no one to tap. Why doesn't he just look through the trash can himself? Coward. He gives up too easily. I've seen him do hard work for a long period of time because food might be a reward. Sabrina says she can't spot him because she won't have enough money for the bus back to Greendale. I thought she was going to start going to school with Jughead, because that's what she had been doing for literally her entire existence as a character past the Madhouse days. Until some genius decided she lives in Greendale. And this decade has been trying to be returned to form, which is why she has a bob haircut and even her aunt's back to being ugly. So why on earth would she still be going to school in Greendale? This isn't really a big deal though. Just a disappointment there's no excuse for. Sabrina just really likes paying people because it's the right thing to do. Because that's the only explanation for why she wouldn't give him the money, and then warp home. I guess she assumes the bus driver's more poor than Jughead, so it'd be better to pay him. Besides, why didn't she just look for his loyalty card in the trash? She should have known magic wasn't necessary. Salem could look for it in the trash. He's a cat anyways. She could have frozen time and levitated the trash away one by one if she really didn't want to touch trash. It's always pathetic when a story that takes itself seriously had no excuse for happening. Jughead only wants to go to the concert for food, because God forbid I expect him to care about something else for 1 second when I was finding that interesting. When being a big eater doesn't mean that you won't love any bands. At least establish that he likes a different band more. Sabrina flies on a broom and wears a mask for no reason, making it look like she's gonna break into a building. Explaining to Salem that Jughead needs to pay for his own food. So she actually lied about bus fare. She was just going to fly home. Warping would still be the only smart option because it's faster. Warping long distance would be so useful that it would not be the spell that would be ignored to save on magic. At least Sabrina's in character by saying this. She thought that in Little Sabrina too. Then her mask disappears for the next 2 panels. So how did the artist get away with that? Sabrina says they're all in there. Salem says it'd be easier to just conjure up a ticket. Sabrina dismisses that as boring. I'm completely tired of Salem having the good advice that gets ignored by Sabrina to disastrous results when Salem tried to take over the world and is the devil on her shoulder. So how the hell can he juggle these 2 conflicting roles? Having Salem disagree instead of agree with her just makes her look like even more of an idiot who had no excuse for making a mistake because he warned her. When he's supposed to be the irresponsible one, so he should have been egging her on in every situation like this. It makes it look like making Salem able to talk was one of the series' biggest mistakes, because that's all this adds. He could have his sassy dialogue in his head. Sabrina says that anti-counterfeit holograms are really hard to conjure, so she tries to have a good excuse for not doing what Salem suggested. Except witches can conjure anything to equal degrees of success, including dragons. So obviously the hologram would not be hard to conjure. If witches can't conjure up something if they don't know what it looks like, then most of them wouldn't be able to conjure up any living beings because they want to know what all of their internal organs look like. So it has nothing to do with what the hologram looks like. So what is it? A lame excuse for her to ignore the simple solution and make a mistake. It doesn't look like one right now, but I've read enough Sabrina stories to instantly know when she's making a mistake. All she has to do most of the time is ignore Salem's advice. She's gonna give Jughead full VIP backstage treatments from the band. Why does she have a wand? This isn't Harry Potter. Stop making her use a wand. It's not even like it looks pretty. It's just a stick. Salem says he hates it when he's gotta be the responsible one, then don't write it. We're sick of it. At least I hope I'm not the only one who's sick of it. She says she'll up the potency. Why does she have to do that? Salem says this is fate getting back at him for all he put Uncle Mort through. This references young Salem, which is a big surprise because that was in the manga continuity. At least I thought it was, because it was in the 2000s Sabrina comic with its manga style. And if it wasn't part of that continuity, well, it was advertised at the very end of it, so anybody would think it was canon. After that needlessly depressing line, that better just be referencing him being an annoying child as usual, and not him being awful to Mort when he's trying to take over the world. Sabrina says she needs to enchant something near and dear to their hearts, because overcomplicating magic for no reason, fuck continuity, when she didn't need to say this at all. She already had a smart plan by casting a spell so that when the Pussycats hear their melodies, they'll become big fans of Jughead. That plan made sense without needing this convoluted nonsense to justify it. As if Sabrina needs to stick to enchanting things that are dear to a person's heart every single time she wants to cast a spell on them. She didn't have to cast spells on the things dear to Jughead's heart the last story she mattered in. She suddenly has a mask again and her eyeballs are gone because the artist really enjoys making her look evil every time she uses magic. For some strange reason. Did the series get taken over by a Bundy in the 2010s? Because why else has magic been nothing but evil? Why has she not used magic for good and had it work out even once? Why does Josie ask her friends if anyone heard of that? That makes no sense. If people could hear Sabrina's magic, they'd look over to her every time she used it. And that never happened. I like that she's reading a Katie Keene comic, and Melody's doing something I didn't see her do yet, play a video game on her phone. Seems to be the most relatable she's ever been. Josie is suddenly smart enough to use big words related to music, which I never saw her use in the Josie stories I read. But she does desperately need a unique trait. And she's the main character of Josie, so her becoming a genius makes sense meta-wise. She's not going to be accused of positive discrimination if she's a genius all of a sudden. Though we always liked Valerie more than her. At least Valerie has a better hairstyle now. She kinda looks pretty if you look past the art style ruining the issue. She has no reason to accuse Josie of hating her lyrics, since Josie never read or heard them before this page. But it's a relief that she's smiling, so it's harmless. Josie conveniently decides to do a quick warm-up session with music to keep limber, even though they're all experienced musicians who don't need it. At that point, it would have been better if Sabrina brainwashed them directly into playing the instruments. Of course, it'd be the best of all if Sabrina didn't delude herself into thinking that she needed to enchant the instruments. She obviously could have just brainwashed them directly. Because she brainwashed Jughead and Reggie into seeing a monster as Weatherby. And that's not even mentioning that she brainwashed these people in the 90s comic. They argue over Jughead, and then Melody says they're equal partners in this, and they all agree to share Jughead as a result. So Melody's been really useful here. For once it avoided drama, because it could have easily had them fighting as padding. Valerie apologizes to Josie, who admits that she got a bit worked up. This is the best job showing how good their friendship is, from what I've seen. I understand why her spell would make them all fall in love with Jughead. She said she'd up the potency for no reason, and she just didn't know her own strength when casting a spell to boost someone's opinion of someone. Still, you'd think that adding a no physical affection clause to the magic contract would have instantly been common sense and been effortless for Sabrina. She should have known from him telling her he doesn't like people that way, that he doesn't want kisses. What's inexcusable is, Sabrina sees them drive off and wonders how much trouble she's in and looks scared. If you have the witch know she messed up, there's absolutely no excuse whatsoever for her not pointing to undo the spell. It's not like her magic is restricted to being very short range. She can do stuff like warp a hypnotist to her from who knows how far away. Even if it was, which would also be completely shitting on past continuity, she can make herself super fast, or even freeze time to instantly catch up to their car and break the spell on them. If she can only undo the spell by bothering their instruments, then she could obviously just go to where their instruments are in that building and effortlessly avoid the next issue. She has no excuse for not doing anything. She's not that stupid that she'd forget she can undo a spell with a single point. Why would she know they're outright in love with Jughead just because they were squeeing anyways? Tony confirms that she's just female Jughead, instead of her existence seeming to be justified, because she wants to go to the concert for the food. Yeah, tell me when she gets interesting. The Pussycats stop in front of Betty, who's amazed to see them. Valerie asks Betty if she's from around here. So this is definitely an alternate universe for pretending the Pussycats haven't already interacted with the Archies for no reason. I don't see the point in having main characters reintroduce themselves to each other. The Pussycats want to know where Jughead is. Betty tells them and gets thanked. And Tony lampshades how many girls have wanted to date Jughead recently. And then she says if someone learned the secret to Jughead's newfound mojo, and Betty completes her train of thought by saying they could have anyone they wanted. They know Jughead doesn't like people that way, so they wouldn't think it was anything he was doing. And then they smirk evilly, as if Betty's not supposed to be good anymore. I assume this is going to lead to something, instead of being completely dropped, making this whole page a waste of comic space. That night, Moose is generous enough to let Dilton sit on him piggyback style at the concert. Archie makes his girlfriend happy with a gift, and Jughead thanks Sabrina for getting him in. She told Jughead she needed to save her money for bus fare, so she's supposed to be back in Greendale by now. I guess she postponed going back home because she knew she was in trouble. Sabrina explains why she got a ticket, and reiterates in a whisper that anti-counterfeit holograms are hard to conjure, so she says she bought 2 by mistake. If they're hard to conjure, how in the hell did she conjure up 2 effortlessly? If anything, that means they're twice as easy to conjure as everything else. Also, if she's fine with zapping up counterfeit tickets, so either she's not a goody two-shoes anymore, or she couldn't buy a ticket in time. If she's fine with doing that, why didn't she just brainwash the Ticketmaster into letting her in? You would say that's evil too, and it's supposed to be easier than this. It takes too long to get to the point where the Pussycats play a song. The Pussycats' song turns the eyes of the girls pink, brainwashing them all into wanting him. Because Sabrina made her spell like a virus, ridiculously irresponsibly, when she never did it before. And it's blatantly obvious she'd have to intentionally make it so that it was a virus for it to be like that, because the spells on people never spread. It's so pathetic how forced this story is. She'd have undone it by now. If Sabrina can cast a spell to make herself immune, why the hell didn't she do this for the rest of them? It's supremely lazy to not explain that when it's the whole reason the next story happens. It's like the writer was definitely too dumb to think that she could do it for everyone else. She has magic in the next issue, enough to affect everyone here. So she could have used that amount of magic to shield them all from the song. At first I thought she was just smart by doing this, but no, she's just having common sense, but not nearly enough. And isn't it lame that the story ends there? I still hate when stories can't wrap up the plot in one issue. Oh no. This was by Mark Waid and Ian Flynn, who I thought would never write a Sabrina story again, and had no reason to be on this because he didn't write the previous Jughead Sabrina stories. This story was about Jughead wanting to get food from a concert, and somehow forgetting his loyalty card for the concert ticket, and somehow Pop-Tate doesn't see it when he puts it in the trash, and somehow Jughead doesn't care enough about food to go ask Pop-Tate to let him search for it. And somehow Jughead didn't bring his wallet when he went to Pop Tate's, when he would always do that. Which is why he was too scared to go back to Pop Tate's because he wouldn't have the money. So Sabrina wants to reward him for his help earlier so bad that she casts a spell to make the Pussycats give him the VIP treatment to bring him backstage. But I never see them bring him backstage. They just drive off looking for him because they're in love. And since she thinks she's in trouble the second she sees that, there's no excuse whatsoever for not undoing the spell that she somehow made too strong and preventing them from spreading their love of Jughead at the concert. Obviously, her spell would have been specific to the Pussycats because that's all she thought about when casting it, so it'd be impossible for them to spread it. Besides, this shouldn't be the basis of a whole extra issue, because everyone knows she can point to undo a spell instantly. And obviously, them even being in love with him romantically is ridiculous in the first place. It doesn't matter that she said she upped the potency. There's non-romantic love too, and it was common sense of her to have a no physical affection spell in the love spell. So what would really happen is that while they would love Jughead more than she'd expect, they wouldn't want to kiss him or hug him. She gets a ticket by conjuring anyways, and was so good at it that she made 2 by mistake. So obviously, instead of dismissing it as too hard to do for Jughead right away, she'd have made Jughead a ticket if it was so easy. If not outright look through the trash to find his loyalty card for him. And she'd already know from experience that it's that easy that she can make 2. The issue doesn't even make good use of Jughead, because all it does is have him be a big eater. If that was all he was, I would have never started to like him. Instead, he's just written like Chip. He comes off like a side character in his own comic, while everyone else seems more important and steals the show. Every writer of the 2010 Sabrina comics is almost as bad as Flynn anyways, because for the most part, this is badly written in all the same ways as all the other comics. The only things unique to Flynn are the Uncle Mort reference, and the fact that Sabrina somehow thinks she has to up the potency and enchant something dear to someone to use magic on them. Because Flynn has no understanding of the Sabrina series, or even the last story she was in where that wasn't the case. So the only reason the spell's even able to spread like a virus and cause the next story like they forgot how magic worked, the only reason it's been this way is that they hired Flynn to write this. From what I can see, there's no point in having him restricted working with another writer, because the shortcomings shine through regardless, making it look like he had no restrictions.